Yeah. That's amazing.
Nice. Good evening, everyone. I think we're ready to start with the MEA board meeting. First item, board announcements. Seeing none, why don't we move to item 2, public open time. Good evening, Gene.
At your meeting 2 months ago, I reminded you that while your current profitability, due to the fact that you had primarily limited your phase 1 customers to large users who pay you at approximately 10 cents per kilowatt hour versus 7 cents per charge per shell. Your lowest two-tier residential rates would pay only 5 cents, a 2-cent loss, which would amount to $10 million when you added the 61,000 remaining residential units. Since then, 4 things have happened which are important to modify that concern. First, you've initiated the phase 2A, primarily limiting new customers to the higher user category. This should further your profitability, but continues to be less than truthful to the public relative to the reasons for your profitability. Second, your staff is to be congratulated in negotiating a new lower confirming price for the phase 2A contract customers. However, it should be noted that this reduction covers only about 1/4 of the previously described potential residential loss, still leaving it in excess of 1.5 cents per kilowatt hour, worth several $1 million a year. Third, just this last week, the CPUC decided to partially agree to the PG&E proposal to readjust the rate structure so that the bottom 2 residential tiers would not be subsidized so much by the upper tiers. They did this not by adjusting the lower 2 rates, but rather by decreasing the baseline quantity, which effectively forces the average 550 kilowatt hour per month user into tier 3 as well as the bottom 2 tiers, thereby raising their costs without raising rates. At the same time, they reduced the rates for tiers 3 and 4 and eliminated tier 5, lowering the cost for those users. Significantly, they have not yet announced how much of that reduction will be allocated to generation or how much will be allocated to distribution. That could be very important to you. You, of course, have the option to follow these changes or not. At first glance, if you decide to decrease the baseline quantity, the increased income from the new, now lower 3 tiers will partially solve your lower tier loss problem, lowering it to on the order of less than 1 cent per kilowatt hour. However, although you may not have PG&E's average large use customers, the lowering of the rates of the upper 2 tiers, which was intended to be overall cost neutral to PG&E, will largely offset the gain you would make on the lower 2 tiers. Thus, you have an ethical problem. Should you follow suit and change your baseline quantity and the tier rates for 3 and 4, which would reduce the incentive to conserve on energy usage? Or should you do neither, recognizing that not reducing the tier 3 and 4 rates will make you very non-competitive with PG&E and the higher usage residential customers? Incidentally, your website does not indicate the value of your baseline quantity, which you should do so whether or not you follow PG&E's lead. Fourth, you're about to enter into a contract for 40 megawatts of electric of solar power at as unyet named price. This will also decrease your income. Incidentally, your prior schedule called for you to review and negotiate those contracts in March and April, with firm plans for the board to consider in May or June. Some reason why they're not on the agenda? The bottom line then is that although your ability to provide electricity to all of your potential residential customers at a price which is competitive with PG&E has somewhat improved, it is still not likely to happen unless you can find additional cost or pricing improvements. Thank you.
Thank you, Gene. I'll note that you provided extensive written comments consistent with your verbal statement that you just gave. We received that late last week. Unfortunately, Dawn did not get it. Probably an email oversight. I think you intended to have her see it, so she just got it today. So we have it. And you raise a number of issues that are worth...
Additional pages, this is just a summary, additional pages of every data and calculations to support that.
Exactly. So we're going to give it careful consideration. Staff now has it,
Thank you very much.
and we will be back with you on it. Thanks. Any further public comment?
My name is Rachel Guinness. I'm the founder of the Marin chapter of the Citizens Climate Lobby. I am so proud to participate in the creation of national legislation coming from Marin, where we are offering our citizens 100% clean, renewable energy right now. I believe carbon fee and dividend legislation, together with community choice aggregation, is the perfect legislative pairing. It will get this country moving toward a secure energy policy that will create millions of new jobs and move us toward clean, renewable energy in the most rapid and equitable way possible. Fee and dividend works from the top down by putting a steadily rising price on carbon-based fuels as they enter the economy, at the mine, the well, or the port of entry. This sends a clear market signal that allows for predictable change in investment and behavior. It protects people from the rising cost of fossil fuels by returning 100% of the dividends to American households. The law is self-regulating. The people, industries paying for carbon are the ones making it. This creates a rational incentive for change. Fee and dividend gives us the impetus we need to move to renewable energy. Community choice aggregations give us the mechanism we need to create the system as rapidly as possible by opening the door to competition and local control. A carbon fee and dividend law would aid other communities in taking steps as we have done here in Marin. It creates a clear market incentive that encourages private investment, so no one will ever again have to ask their county to fund such a delicate venture. I wanted to make you aware that I have gone to the County Board of Supervisors to ask for a resolution in support of a fee and dividend approach to the carbon problem. Last year, I went to Congress with a letter from Supervisor Charles McClatchin to Senator Barbara Boxer supporting the Citizen Climate Lobby's proposal. In respect to that effort and recognizing the importance and urgency of the problem, I would like to go this year offering an even greater show of support from this county. I would like to also go to Congress with a letter from your president or executive director encouraging this comprehensive strategy. It means a great deal to have energy providers see the wisdom in this approach. Damon or Don, you will add your name to an impressive group of leaders that have already lent their voices to this important effort. Rex Tillerson, the CEO of ExxonMobil, said, "I believe the American people want climate policy that is transparent, honest, and effective. I firmly believe it is not too late for Congress to consider a carbon tax as the better policy approach." I hope you'll consider my proposal. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Any further public comment?
My name is Chris Brown, and I don't really know if this is appropriate, but I wanted to let you know that for the public speaking part, but I work with a group called Main Street Moms. It's a citizen action group, and there's an active group in West Marin, and we have a Western Weekend Parade this weekend. And we are going to be in the parade as Moms Love Clean Energy, and you can sign up for Deep Green, and we have the telephone number on a big banner. And we're going to pass out these, which are a recipe for deep green apple pie on one side, and then the other side is recipe for a better world. And I won't read the whole thing, but it starts with the ingredients, which includes passionate citizens, visionary leaders, tireless volunteers, inspired public officials. And then it has instructions. Mix a large number of citizens concerned about climate change with a few visionary and dedicated leaders. Add a landmark state law and combine with grassroots outreach and as many passionate volunteer hours as you can possibly spare. Stir in a few imaginative public officials to taste. Wait patiently for longer than you ever imagined, and don't lose hope. Then, when you're ready to do your part, savor the delicious option of buying deep green, 100% renewable power from Marin Clean Energy. Serve thousands of happy customers. And then we have a paragraph of what is Marin Clean Energy and the telephone number.
Chris, when and where is
the parade is this Sunday, June 5th, downtown Point Reyes. It starts at 12, the floats and the marchers and the horses and everybody lines up at around 11. So it's only downtown Point Reyes, so it's 2 blocks, and it lasts about half an hour. We used to go around twice, but now there's.
Chris, is this on? Chris, I want to just recognize the moms for the great float that you guys did at the Mill Valley Memorial Day parade, and it was such a treat to be following the deep green float and all the signs, and you all just do a great job on a dime. So thank you very much for being there. I think it was very effective.
Our pleasure.
Thanks.
Hi, Stan Sparrow.
Good evening, Stan.
Well, I want to thank you guys for the no nuclear disarmaments statement that you did last meeting, and it was in the papers. That's why I'm helping you guys out. I really want to help the environment. And the other big thing is this solar project. That's another important thing for me, and I'm wondering what's happening with that. I hope that we can talk about it in the meeting. And then after last meeting, I talked to Calpine, the Western Regional Manager again. They are wanting to talk to Marine Clean Energy. I mean, I'm in the middle. And then Harmony, June 12th to 14th. Lori has a booth there for Sunrise Center, and have some of your flyers or something or rather. And a whole bunch of other CCAs and things will be there as well. They're going green in a big way in the Harmony Festival. And I know it's Sonoma, but would love to see Marine Clean Energy have some sort of connection with that. And then the other interesting thing, in San Anselmo recently, they just got a bunch of smart meters. My friends were pretty upset. And I've been testing some of the smart meters just for your information. I know we can't do anything about the darn things, but why people are so upset is that they're the same power as the cell phone, and my test results are from PG&E is not telling us the whole truth, as usual. But the smart meter where they put next to a beehive that had been for 10 years, thousands and thousands of honeybees in a tree. They put the smart meter there, all gone. Okay, so this is really important for our food and our future. And this hive was just up in Mill Valley. And so this is happening in a lot in Santa Cruz and Watsonville, where they have a lot of bees. So just letting people know that's the biggest problem with smart meters. Okay, thank you.
Thanks. I think I'll be speaking at the Harmony Festival.
Oh,
So
awesome.
we'll
Well,
see you out there.
Yeah, see you there.
Okay, oh, okay.
Just a quick one.
I'm pinch hitting for Sean. It's public now.
I'm Barbara George,
Hi,
Women's
Barbara.
Energy Matters, and I wanted to let you know that the response that we filed to the PG&E's motion to strike our testimony, this has to do with our anti-nuclear proposal. We basically proposed that the utilities should replace San Onofre and Diablo Canyon and Palo Verde power with energy efficiency and renewables. And we should plan for that immediately. And so we filed a response, and at the hearing, the judge almost allowed them to strike our testimony, but he decided not to. So we are still in the game, and we have this opportunity to create a plan for getting off of nuclear power in California, and I'll keep you posted.
Thanks. Okay, seeing no further members of the public wishing to speak, let's move to item 3, report from Executive Officer Dawn.
Great, I just have 4 items this evening. The first is I wanted to let the board and the public know that through advice letter filing that PG&E did at the CPUC recently, we've been able to address some of the confidentiality issues that will allow us to have third-party viewing of customer bills, which will greatly improve our ability to provide customer service when customers are calling in and have questions about the way the bill looks. Oh, we need those shades down? Yeah, that'd be great. Thanks, that's broken. I don't want to blind you guys.
So essentially, so I'm sorry, just to clarify. So essentially you were able to work a way around the customer data so that you now have more information to be able to provide customer assistance.
Yeah, the mechanics of it were that the NDA, the non-disclosure agreement that we have in place between MEA and PG&E was structured in such a way that PG&E's legal department felt we were not able to have access to some of the information that we needed, including care data and third-party viewing of customer bills. So a change was made to the non-disclosure agreement, which seemed very minor in our view, but was what their legal department needed in order to have comfort with providing us with that data. So we, of course, supported their filing at the CPUC, and it was approved last week, and it was effective as of June 1st, yesterday. So we are looking forward to being able to do third-party viewing of bills. There are still some mechanics that need to be worked out so that they can, they're still trying to figure out how to provide that information to us in a usable format. They are able to provide us information through their call center right now, which is helpful, but we're hoping that we can get it accessible electronically.
Awesome. Great.
And the care data is currently being provided.
Yes, which I know that's been a long wait. So.
Yeah, it's really important because this allows us, when there's a customer that signs up that's already a care customer, we can automatically give them the care rate without finding out after the fact that they were getting overcharged. So it's very helpful. The second item I wanted to report on is really exciting news. I'm very happy to announce that at 3 o'clock today, SB 790 was approved on the Senate floor. The bill was named the McGlashan bill, and it will now be going over to the Assembly side to go through the process there. It was approved on a 24-12 vote with several Republicans voting in favor, including Senator Rubio, who spoke in support of the bill, Senator Berryhill, and Senator Haynes. The next steps in the process are for the bill to go to the Energy Committee on the Assembly side, and that needs to happen by July 8th. There's been a recess between July 15th and August 15th, at which time the bill will then need to go to the floor of the Assembly and need to be voted out by the 26th. So that's the schedule, and we'll be continuing to work on this bill. There's one item on your consent.
On that, was it further amended on the floor? Or?
No, it was not further amended on the floor. There were several amendments that were made after it came out of the Appropriations Committee, which were all amendments that we all agreed to. We worked with San Francisco on those amendments. And because there have been, this is such a bill with many parts, the fact sheet is very helpful, and I have the fact sheet updated as of today. That is available on the table here and was provided to you all this evening. So if you want to see what the main components are of the bill that are still intact, there's actually quite a bit in there. There are some things that we weren't able to maintain, but there's still a lot of great stuff in here, including access to energy efficiency funds, code of conduct, and some cost shifting issues. So you can take a look at the fact sheet if you want to see how it currently stands.
Dawn?
Yes.
Before you move on, what was the rationale given by the 12 negative votes to vote against it?
There weren't a lot of comments today, but I can tell you the comments that we've heard in the past, if that would be helpful. Folks that are opposed to this bill have expressed concerns about costs to bundled ratepayers and costs about reliability. There are some parts in the bill where we're trying to ensure that CCAs are not double charged for things like resource adequacy, And once our customers depart from the IOU's load, the IOUs should no longer be procuring power on our behalf and then charging us for it, because we're doing our own procurement. That's a problem we are trying to address through the bill. But there was a lack of understanding, in our view really, at the committee level and at the legislative level about how things work. And the opponents of the bill raised concerns about things that, in our view, really weren't valid concerns because of the way the energy market is structured. So cost shifting and reliability was brought up as a concern, but we feel like that there weren't really any valid issues there.
Thank you.
And then the other thing on the legislative front that's not such great news is that AB 976, which we had opposed, also passed this week off of the Assembly floor, and it will now be headed to the Senate under the same time frame to go through the approval process there. Any questions on legislation before I move on? Okay. The next thing is there is a report that has been provided on the table there that I thought might be of interest to the board and the public. This is a report that was recently published by the Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory on the impact of solar systems on home sales and home prices. And this report found that homes with PV in California have sold for a premium of an average of $17,000 for an average PV system. And this is interesting, and it's based on a pretty broad data set of more than 70,000 homes over about a 9-year period, 2,000 of which had solar on the roof. So it's a very interesting report. There hasn't been a report like this before available. So I just wanted to bring it to your attention, and there is actually going to be a webinar on this report with the availability, with an opportunity to do Q&A. So if folks are interested in that, there's information on the table back there. And then the last thing I wanted to announce is that we have a couple of guests here this evening from Richmond. Just across the bridge, we have Vice Mayor Butt, Sasha Curl, Adam Lentz, and I believe I saw one other person.
Councilmember Corky Bouzet.
Very good. Thank you for being here.
Welcome, everyone.
We really appreciate you all coming this evening. And we'll be we'll have an item later on in the agenda where we can interact with everyone.
Great. Anything else, Don?
Yeah, that's it.
Okay, great. Thank you
We
for that.
couldn't hear you back here with all the interruption, and you were saying that PG&E is charging more for people and then keeping it secret. Could you clarify that? It sounds...
What I was referring to is kind of a cost-shifting issue that we've been dealing with on many fronts. So what happens is the IOUs will buy power on our behalf, and then we will have to pay for it in the form of exit fees or other types of charges after we depart from their load. So our goal with this legislation, and you'll hear with many of the things that we're interfacing with at the CPUC, is to ensure that once our load departs, that we're no longer having to pay for IOU procurement.
Any questions for Dawn? Okay, let's move on.
And I'm sorry, I have one other announcement.
Okay, good.
I almost forgot, but very important. We have a new intern who's here with us this evening, Simon. Simon joined our team a couple of weeks ago and has already become a very valuable part of the team, and we're really excited he's here tonight to get to know you all a little bit better, and he'll be with us throughout the summer. And Simon, would you say a couple things about yourself?
Yeah, thank you, Don. I'm from UC Berkeley. I'm going to be a senior next year and excited to be a part of this team.
What are you studying?
Environmental engineering science.
Great.
Thank you.
Okay, item 4, consent calendar. One thing to note on C2, there's a typo at the bottom of the page. The footer should be May 17, 2011, rather than April 7, 2011. So with that correction, can I have a motion to approve the consent calendar?
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That matter carries. Item 5, Charles F. McGlashan Advocacy Appreciation Award. Don.
Jamie's going to introduce this.
Okay, great.
All right, thanks. Well, I'd say it goes without saying that Marin Clean Energy would not be where it is today if it wasn't for the dedication and support of the nonprofit and advocacy organizations and individuals in our community who have pushed the Marin Clean Energy program forward since the very idea was born way back in 2002. They've stood beside us and sometimes even a few steps ahead of us. And as we've studied and explored and developed and launched Marin Clean Energy, they've stood up at meetings for us, they've held their own meetings, they've attended events and dedicated countless hours of their own time educating and explaining and promoting and advocating for our own local clean energy cause here in Marin. And I think that we can truly say that all of the advocates have been with us through thick and thin. Charles McGlashan spent more than 8 years guiding politicians and advocates to pioneer Marin Clean Energy, and in every single speech that I ever heard Charles give about Marin Clean Energy, he always mentioned and thanked the advocates for their hard work and never forgot about them. And there were many, many speeches that he gave, so that was nice. To honor Charles's legacy and his environmental leadership, and also to recognize all of the individuals and organizations who have dedicated so much of their time to this agency, we, the staff, believe that the board should establish an official Charles F. McGlashan Advocacy Award. The establishment of the award was discussed at the executive committee meeting in May, and the executive committee agreed that recipients could be recognized with an award ceremony that would be held at regular board meetings, and that we would have a plaque placed in the McGlashan conference room of the MEA offices that would name the advocates, whoever the recipient was for the award. So as far as nominations were concerned, we thought that they could be submitted to staff or to the board by anyone throughout the year at any time, and that we would ask the nomination would include a brief description of what that nominee had done to help Marin Clean Energy. And the nominations would be submitted to the executive committee, and they would be able to make the recommendation to the full board for the recipient of that award. And they would be given a maximum of 4 times a year. And so there's a resolution attached to this staff report, and approval of that resolution would officially establish the Charles F. McGlashan Advocacy Award.
Thanks, Jamie. Director, comment?
Question, Jamie, this award, are we talking about 2 different McGlashan awards now? This award is for energy advocacy. I thought we were talking at one time about another McGlashan award that was not necessarily related to energy advocacy. It was any other projects. Am I
You thinking about MCCMC?
dreaming? Is it MCCMC?
Yeah.
You might be thinking about MCCMC.
All right.
This
good.
is our only one.
Yeah.
All right.
Any other questions or comments?
Great idea.
Absolutely. Members of the public? Okay, well, great. We're obviously honored to be able to establish this award and really appreciate what the advocates do for us. Can I have a motion to approve the McGlashan Award?
I'll move
resolution number 2011-10.
Director
Second.
Tremaine, Director Marshall. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Thank you, everyone. Item 6, appointment of secretary and treasurer. Greg, you're going to handle this item?
Yes, I will. It should be fairly straightforward here. Our bylaws and also our joint powers agreement provide for the appointment of a secretary and treasurer, and that is done every year. And currently the secretary is Don and the treasurer is Barbara. And there's no limit on the number of terms that anyone may hold these offices. So before you tonight, since the bylaws calls for these positions to be filled every June, we need to once again appoint the positions for a one-year term that would expire in June of 2012. So that's before you this evening.
Barbara, I assume you're willing to continue as treasurer?
Sure.
Great. And Don, secretary. Any board discussion of this item? Members of the public? Okay, can I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Thank you.
Opposed? Thank you for your service. Okay, item 7, appointment of new chairs and new members to the XCOM and TechCom. Let me set up this item. Both issues have been discussed in the respective committees and vetted. And there are 2 sets of slates that we'd like to bring to the board this evening. So technical committee, Dick Collins has agreed to be the chair of that committee. 2 new members would be appointed, Sean Marshall and Jonathan Leone. And Lou Tremaine would stay on serving on that committee. Both Barbara and myself would step down from TechCom. Do you want to take these in order, Don, or should I also do XCOM? So why don't we focus on TechCom for a second. So do we have any discussion or further thoughts on that? Okay.
Only to thank Damon and Barbara for their good hard services on the committee before you step down.
Thank you.
Both.
All right. Thank you for stepping up.
Yeah.
Okay, why don't we then take a motion on the proposed new technical committee lineup?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? XCOM, I would step in as chair. The committee would now include Barbara Thornton as a new member, and Sean and Lou. So Connolly, Thornton, Marshall, and Tremaine is the proposal. Any discussion of that item? Okay, do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, that matter carries. All right, well, great. I think we're set to move forward with our 2 key committees. So thank you, everyone, for your service on that. Okay, item 8, communications update.
All right.
Jamie.
Thank you. Well, I'm happy to report that our Deep Green enrollments are still increasing pretty significantly, and we're continuing to track the reasons that customers are providing for their enrollment via the online enrollment form, and also when they call in to enroll, we'll ask them. And right now, actually, the main reason that people are giving for enrolling is through events and word of mouth. Followed by newspaper articles, and they're also still referencing advertisements on the bus sides and even our social media on Facebook and Twitter, so it's looking pretty good there. We've been going to lots of events, and included in your packet is a new little flyer we have about enrolling for Deep Green that we're giving to the events, at the events, and also some of our advocates have been handing out as well for us. So if any of you would like extra copies of that, just let me know and I'd be happy to provide them to you. So I've listed in the staff report the events that we attended in May, and we've also got some coming up in June, which is pretty exciting. In addition to encouraging the Deep Green enrollments at the events, and the general what, why, and how of marine clean energy, there are a couple of other points that we've been talking about a lot with customers, and they both revolve around the customer enrollments that are scheduled in August, this August. So we've got about 5,500 customers scheduled to be enrolled in August, and they're a mix of residential and commercial accounts, and most of them are residential. They've been sent their opt-out notices, so they received their first terms and conditions in May, and they received those have the terms and conditions of the program, information about signing up for Deep Green, and then also how to opt out should a customer choose not to participate. They received their first in early May, and the second notice went out this week. The third will go out in early August, and the fourth will go out in September. So in order to ensure that we had an adequate energy supply for this next phase of customers, your board approved the first amendment to the confirmation with Shell Energy North America. And as a result, it increased our light green renewable energy content to 27% from 25%, which is really great. So we're just getting greener. And we've been letting folks know that, and that will be reflected in all of our future marketing materials and is up on our website as well right now. That amendment to the agreement also ensures that we'll be at 33% renewable energy by 2015. We've had 2 press releases go out in May, and those were about the enrollments in August and also about the increase in our renewable energy supply. And then we've also had some website updates in the last month. So if you guys are looking for meeting documents from any of our technical or executive committee board meetings or special meetings from 2010, they're on an archive page now. There's links for that. Same with the resolutions. So you'll have to search a little bit more for the 2010 resolutions, but they're up there. And we've got additional deep green enrollment links scattered throughout our website now to make that a little bit easier. And we've also got a quick link column in the left-hand side of every article so that if people are looking for specific links, they don't have to read through the text. And that's all.
Okay, great.
Chair?
Yes.
What is the current deep green enrollment and what was the increase over in May?
Well, the overall enrollment in deep green is, I believe it's at about 6% right now, which has gone up. I mean, overall, it's hard to say exactly what the percentage was. Our highest enrollment period yet has still been April, so it's decreased since April, but in April we had, I think, like 7 times what we've ever had before. Right now, we're still significantly higher than what we've had in previous months leading up until now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Further questions, discussion? Members of the public? Okay, great. Well, thank you, Jamie.
Thank you.
Great report. So do we need to, is there any action?
Informational only.
Okay, great. So let's move to item 9, regulatory update. Always our favorite.
I'm glad you feel that way, David. I feel the same way.
This is the first time we've ever gotten to regulatory by 7:45.
We are ready.
Which means there'll be a quiz afterwards, since you're all awake. There has been no lack of things to do at the commission this past month. I think that the most significant thing that's occurred recently is that on May 26th, the Public Utilities Commission approved the residential rate design for PG&E, which means that the conservation incentive adjustment, this is the rate flattening, will be happening, and it's going to become effective as of July 1st, 2012. We had understood that the commission was heading in this direction for a while, and so our comments in recent weeks have focused on having certainty with regards to when this transition is exactly going to occur, and also making sure that when the billing is implemented, that it's implemented properly, and so that folks are understanding who they're paying for which services, and so it's clearly delineated on everybody's bill. And so those 2 items, the date certain, we got, and as did the billing system questions and checking to verify that there is a timeline in place and there's a plan in place to make sure that all the billing when the CIA is rolled out is going to happen properly. And so actually we are within 30 days of the decision. PG&E is required to meet with us and with CCSF and with commission staff to ensure that there are these steps that are going to be taken with regards to their billing. And so, this is going to impact rate design issues but for a later point in time. So there's another year until that's implemented. So that's probably the most significant.
But that's great news, right, Beth?
Yeah.
I mean, it's a step on the path to
Yeah, I think that
better news around.
Yeah, I think that there have been billing issues that have been laid out in all of the legislative reports, the quarterly legislative reports, and the difficulty that there's been in working with the PG&E billing system, which I was speaking to one former PG&E employee who called it crusty. It's not an easy system to work with, but I'm glad that there's a year lead time to make sure that when this is implemented, it's not going to be causing significant impacts on our customers, and we have enough time to provide communication to them. And the way that the proposed decision was previously worded, it was unclear. PG&E wasn't required to implement the conservation incentive adjustment on a specific date, and so that would have caused disparate impacts on all of our customers. You roll in people, you change the date too soon, lower users versus higher users get penalized or benefited. So this at least provides some level of continuity for our customers, which is very helpful.
And I'll also chime in that it will be effective after our next rate setting cycle, which I think will be also beneficial because it'll give us some time to do some planning and adjust our rates to account for this shift.
Could I ask a question? On PG&E's website, they say June 20th, the new rates will apply.
Yeah, so there's the rate design is there. The rate design decision that came out regarding residential rate design touched on a lot of different topics. One of the topics related to having a care tier 3. Other ones were just, how are the rates allocated and baselines and things like that. And those are being implemented earlier. Those are being implemented in advance of summer. However, this specifically on the conservation incentive adjustment, there's a future date for its implementation. So it's different than the other ones. The next happening is in the direct access docket, and this relates to sort of the exit fees. This is the continuing briefing that has been going on at the commission regarding the green adders and other modifications to ensure that that our exit fees are the methodology is a fair methodology, so that the correct costs are being passed through to us and our customers. And so this is really the end of the conversation. There was opening briefs and reply briefs both this month, and we should anticipate a decision in June, possibly July, but this has been really a fast track proceeding, and I think we can anticipate something very soon. And I anticipate that it'll be significant and beneficial. It will correct a methodology flaw that has really been challenging. So on the next item, long-term procurement plan, this relates to how PG&E is projecting their load on a going forward basis. One of the issues that I believe we discussed last time was just that in their bundled procurement plan, they did not account for the full amount of CCA load departure, nor did they account for the full direct access departure with the reopening of direct access, which has been fully subscribed every step along the way. So John DeLacy developed testimony in support of our position, and that was submitted to the commission this past month.
Why do we care about that? What are the implications?
Yeah, the implications here are just this is what directs PG&E to, this is what allows them to procure. So they have to make projections farther into the future, 10 years into the future.
Right.
And they're saying, well, are we going to build a new plant? Are we going to enter into these contracts? And if you don't account for our load, it looks like they will need to serve a greater load than they actually do. So what happens is they overprocure, And those become costs that are borne by us as departing load. So we'll be keeping an eye on that. The process in the LTPP has not been particularly straightforward, as Barbara is aware. One of the next items here relates to there's a new rulemaking that regarding the RPS standards, and this is really where SB 1X2 is really where the rubber meets the road for the purpose of the commission. And so, first there's going to be a set of rules that are going to be established, and what does that legislation really mean? How are we required to procure? And those are going to be the key issues that are going to be addressed first, but I think that another series of issues is going to be addressed here where I believe we discussed in one of the earlier board meetings the disparate treatment of community choice aggregators and investor-owned utilities. The key issue there is that the investor-owned utilities have an off-ramp for the renewables that they're required to procure. So if there are rate impacts above a certain threshold, and it sounds like the threshold is fairly small, if the costs start impacting rates, the IOUs are allowed an off-ramp. However, there's no off-ramp for direct access providers or community choice aggregators. So that means that, even if PG&E is only required to procure 20% renewables, we would still be required to procure, say, 33 in 2020. So I think that's going to be a significant issue, but there are a lot of preliminary matters first that just relate to interpreting the legislation and determining what are the rules of procurement going to be for everybody. Another item is cap and trade. This is how greenhouse gas allowances are going to be allocated among the different entities. The way this works, because of the CARB rules, it's really an allocation relates to the generation line item in a way. However, all of these allocations are being given to the distribution entity for them to allocate among everybody in their service territory, including us. And the IOUs filed a joint motion for 2012, at least, the future years are going to have to be determined, to allocate those amounts just to the distribution line item. So that means that all CCAs and direct access providers, they would all benefit from this. And so we are generally in support of their proposal. There's a couple of clarifications we filed comments on. So there's going to be an expedited process that's going to be taking a look at how these are going to be allocated in 2012, and then a subsequent phase that's going to determine from there on out, are these going to be allocated towards energy efficiency or renewable energy projects or just distribution rates. And obviously, while we're wholeheartedly supportive of energy efficiency and renewable energy projects, it starts becoming a lot more complicated when it's being funneled through the investor-owned utilities to reach us. And so to begin, we're supportive of putting it on the distribution, credit to everybody on the distribution line item so everybody benefits. So we'll be following that docket. There was a pre-hearing conference today, so that was where we went over scheduling items and also this outstanding motion. For demand response, there was a scoping memo that was issued for this docket, and what this relates to are how the budgets of demand response are going to be allocated for the IOUs. And currently, my understanding is that the IOUs currently are counting their demand response programs as a distribution cost, and this is hundreds of millions of dollars. And so obviously, if we have our own demand response programs, that would be a generation cost. So we believe that those should be aligned. So we'll be following this docket as well. There's another docket that relates to demand response also, but it's the rules for how folks can participate in demand response. There was a working group work product that was submitted, but the next steps are still to be determined, and this is just how we will be able to launch a demand response program of our own, what rules we would need to follow. There's also, after this was updated, PG&E yesterday filed their ERA, which is the Energy Resource Recovery Account. This relates to sort of these short-term costs that PG&E faces and how those are allocated. And again, PG&E has not accounted for our full load departure in their projections. And so currently they will be, if their methodology and if their application is accepted as is, it would not reflect the full departure of our load. So they would be over procuring of where we have certainty as to when our load is departed. In fact, they have not even taken out phase 2A, which is going to be coming online in the next couple of months. They will not take out any load until we are actually serving customers, even though it's an unreasonable assumption. So we will be working on that coming up. It's usually more administrative in nature, but with the new reopening of direct access and with our CCA online now and hopefully CCSF's coming online soon, it's become a little bit less administrative in nature. And then the last item that I wanted to touch on, and maybe, I don't know if Dawn maybe wants to touch on this, relates to bridge funding and energy efficiency programs.
Sure. So there's been some discussion among parties that are currently receiving public goods charge funding and running ongoing energy efficiency programs through the utilities to extend the current funding cycle, which is set to end in 2012, and extending it at least another year under the current set of parameters without any modifications or without any need to reapply. We asked to be part of settlement discussions with these groups so that we could keep the main goal in our mind is to ensure that CCAs are not precluded from applying for funds mid-cycle. So if they're going to extend the cycle another year, that puts us into the end of 2013. We want to make sure that between now and then we would be able to apply for funds in the interim. At this point, that provision has been added into the discussion, and we're hopeful that that will stay on the radar. In the meantime, the energy efficiency discussion has been shifted. It was in Commissioner Gunick's office, and as she's no longer with the commission, it needed to be reassigned, and it's been reassigned to Commissioner Farron's office, but has not yet been placed on an agenda. So we intend to meet with Commissioner Farron this summer, and have already put in word to the staff of the office to find out when they might be bringing that item up. Because we're hopeful that some more discussions can happen specifically around how CCAs can apply for that funding. That discussion got about halfway through the process like last fall, as you might remember, but never concluded in a final decision making. So that work will continue to update you as that progresses.
Are there any questions on regulatory?
Good job.
Get that.
Jonathan, did
The
you
fact that
read
you
the
can-
whole packet again?
Well, you didn't have that whole.
No, I was going to say the fact that you can kind of make this understandable and clear is amazing. I mean, PUC proceedings are not known for that, so good job.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Public, any questions on this item? Okay.
Did that SB 790 affect you, and the other one that
976, maybe 976. Each of them will have, well, maybe 976 isn't going to, well.
Yeah. AB 976, we don't believe would have any impact on MEA, but it could impact other communities that are wanting to start a CCA program. We believe it could have some significant impacts on other communities. SB 790 is intended to remove some of the barriers that are currently in place to entities that want to form a CCA program. So that one would be helpful in some of the things that Beth was talking about, but also in other areas that relate to how we interact with the IOUs.
And then from a regulatory perspective, I don't think that 976 would have significant regulatory impacts. I think that 790 would require some implementation measures by the commission.
Okay. Item 10, consideration of possible expansion of MEA to include new members, both from within and outside of Marin.
Great. So I'll introduce this item. Since we launched, we've had various cities and counties in Northern California reaching out to us to ask about the possibility of membership in our CCA program, or from folks that are interested in getting some support and guidance as they launch their own program.
Don, before you continue,
Sure.
just a note that the staff report on this is currently identified as item 9. It ought to be item 10.
Thank you
Sorry
for
about
clarifying
that.
that. Yeah, thank you. So some of the interested communities are interested simply in offering a choice of energy suppliers in their community where there's currently only one provider. Others are interested in the greenhouse gas reductions and the renewable energy that we've been able to achieve through our CCA program. Because there are considerable costs and challenges in launching a CCA program, some of the communities that have approached us are interested in seeing if they could tag on to our program rather than starting their own, as that would likely be much less resource intensive and costly. But others, as I mentioned, are interested in getting some support and guidance and possibly considering starting their own program. So in response to these inquiries that we've been getting now for almost about a year, we've begun some discussions at the executive committee level to talk about how we might be able to assist other communities. We certainly never intended to set up a program that would be growing beyond the borders of Marin County, but as our board members have articulated and our executive committee members have articulated, we do want to promote greenhouse gas reductions, and we do want to serve as a model to other entities. And if it's helpful to help reach those goals even beyond Marin's borders, there seems to be an interest among our board members to look at ways that we can do that and look at ways we can help bring this idea to other parts of California. So we held our first executive committee meeting on this subject on March 16th. Our second meeting was on April 20th. On April 20th, the executive committee directed staff to develop a set of recommendations with 2 general options. The first option that was outlined was a full membership option, an option that would allow communities from outside of Marin to simply join as a member, determine what the cost would be to our agency to make sure that we're not to make sure that we're covering our costs, but offer something that would be workable from our perspective. The second option that we were asked to outline was something that would look like incubator services, where we could help a CCA get started, where they wouldn't actually become a member of our agency, but they would get some help in starting their own. So these 2 options were outlined and presented at the executive committee meeting on May 20th, and we've included some of the information from that executive committee that was presented and a little bit further refined. We've included that in your packet here, and I'll explain the options briefly, and then I'm happy to answer any questions. Option 1, which is the full membership option, would enable a city or county to receive power from MEA for its municipal, residential, and commercial load. And it would be a similar process to what each of our member cities and towns went through as far as adopting an ordinance to become part of a CCA program. There could be some modifications made to our JPA agreement if we wanted to allow for 1 or more at-large seats on our board, to allow for members from outside of our community to have representation on the board. Greg is here to comment on that if there are questions and respond to how we might do that. We certainly need to give that more thought over the coming months before any decisions are made about what changes we would make to the JPA agreement, if any. I know that the board, or at least our executive committee members, have expressed some concern about having the board become unwieldy. So if there were extra seats added, it would probably be limited to a small number, say 1, 2, or 3 at-large seats. However, an entity could join MEA without having a seat on the board, and there aren't any legal restrictions there if that's something that the city or county is interested in. And the last thing that's important to note on this is that we would need to have some flexibility in phasing in customers so that we're able to procure power and roll them in the best way from a business standpoint. We are not in a position now to roll in a wide number of new customers, nor would we want to enroll new customers from outside of Marin until we've at least completed our full phase 2 roll-in and rolled in the remainder of our customers. However, we could line it up such that we're rolling in another community at the same time that we're completing our phase 2 roll-in, and that might allow us to achieve some economies of scale as far as the cost for negotiating power supply contracts and that sort of thing, doing our noticing and all of the things that go along with rolling in a new phase. So that's kind of an overview of option 1. Then the next option that's outlined here in the staff report, and this didn't receive a lot of discussion at our executive committee, but is something that I think has always kind of been on our mind, that we need to also determine if there's a structure or a cost associated for members inside of Marin County who are not currently members of our agency but would like to join or come back. And this is something that I think it would be helpful in the meeting tonight to get a little input from the board. We're certainly not ready to make a decision on this front, but it's something that would be great to discuss and get a sense of whether it makes sense to have a city or town from within Marin County cover the costs that it would take for us to reintegrate them. The cost would be much lower because we've already done a lot of the analysis, and it would be structured sort of like an a la carte menu where a city or town could choose the things on the menu that they need help with, whether it's getting help writing their implementation plan or getting help drafting a PPA agreement for power supply, or getting help going through a regulatory process. We could help with the things that they choose from. This option has been laid out in a kind of an outline format, but we haven't had the opportunity to fully develop the costs that would be associated with each menu item. We kind of have a rough idea now, but we need a few more weeks to further refine that, and then we plan to bring that back to the executive committee for further discussion at our June meeting, and then we may be able to bring option 2 to your board for approval in July. Option 1 is the one that's more well-formed and included in your staff report and ready for a decision tonight if your board is interested in going forward on that. The last thing I want to mention before we get into the discussion is that the costs for joining as a member are laid out here in the staff report. The tasks are laid out in the staff report, and the associated costs for option 1 would come to around $130,000, which we believe will cover our costs. However, tonight what we're requesting is that the option be approved on a pilot basis so that we can make adjustments as we go forward if we find that the costs are, if we've underestimated any of the costs, for example, or if we need to make adjustments on some of the tasks. The things that would be required to incorporate a new member would be to obtain and analyze their customer data, their usage information, and look at the economic impact to MEA, do modeling around that. Outreach and interface with the city councils does take time, and that's something that we need to do to make sure that those councils are able to make an informed decision and ask questions that they may have. And those, the things I just outlined are kind of the upfront tasks that need to happen before we're able to really dive into the latter stage of the process. And I should have also mentioned in that first phase, there would need to be some resources allocated to look at any modifications that we would make to our JPA agreement, because that would need to happen kind of ahead of time. Those first 4 items that are listed here under costs
would amount to 40,000, and that would need to be kind of covered up front whether or not the community goes forward. But then if the community does go forward and approves the ordinance, then we could follow up by doing the remainder of the tasks here, which would include, negotiating a power supply agreement to serve their customers, sending out opt-out notices to all of their customers, making sure that our call center is able to accommodate calls from that community, also modifying and adopting our implementation plan, assisting with ongoing customer communications, and then also interfacing on the regulatory front with issues that might relate to the new community. So we believe that the costs that that are being proposed here would cover what it would take for us to help a new community become incorporated, and it would certainly be a much lower cost for the community than if they were to do this on their own. Our startup costs were much higher than that. So that's one thing that local governments are great at doing, is plagiarizing, what other folks have done, and we encourage that. We do it all the time too. In fact, San Joaquin helped us a lot get down the track. So I think the cost to do another one of these is now much lower for new communities. The cost for incubator services, as I said, still needs to be fleshed out a bit more. So the recommendation now is really related primarily to option 1, and we'd love to hear input from the board on the other option 2, and the MEA membership for local communities.
Don, can you set the context for this by talking a little bit about the discussions that are happening, both outside of Marin and within Marin?
Yeah. So as you all may know, there are quite a few communities that have become interested in launching a CCA program and have been interfacing with us quite a bit. A few of these include Richmond, who is here tonight. They're very interested in the CCA idea, and we've had multiple meetings with them. In fact, Charles went and met with them in as recently as early March, and has worked with many of their council members, and we've met with their finance department and staff and city manager, and have had a lot of interaction, and they actually passed a resolution just last week, I think it was last Tuesday, stating that they would like to work with MEA to explore a CCA program. So they are actually reaching out to us, and kind of their strong interest and interest in turning things around quickly, which we like, and we like to do ourselves, has really prompted us to keep these discussions rolling and not put them too much on the back burner. So that's been a strong impetus. But in addition to Richmond, we've had inquiries from Arcata. We've had exchanges with them, and actually had representatives go up to Arcata to meet with them and present. They've come down to meet with us as well. Monterey has expressed an interest. We've had similar meetings with Monterey. Just this week we had representatives from San Jose come up to meet with us. They're very interested. In fact, I have some materials that they gave us related to their green planning and that sort of thing on the table there, just to share what they're up to. Who else? Sonoma is working on a program. They just did an RFP process to get someone to work on a feasibility plan for them, and they are interested probably in moving forward within the next year or so and getting a program off the ground. Of course, San Francisco is already on track to getting theirs up and off the ground. There have been some inquiries in Napa and San Luis Obispo, but those aren't at the elected official level. They're more community-based. Excuse me, Davis also, that's right, they came out to meet with us a couple weeks ago. So yeah, Davis, Yolo County has expressed a pretty strong interest as well. There are nuances in each of these places. One of the nuances in Davis is they have land that's a lot of good sites for solar production, and so they'd be interested in possibly being kind of a net exporter of energy to us if we were to join up together. So did I miss any others?
I think so.
Okay.
Good job.
Then within as well.
Yeah, within Marin, we have heard some interest expressed in a couple of communities, and including Ross and Larkspur, and certainly in Novato at the community level. There's a lot of interest there in relooking at the CCA idea and joining our program. I think that timing-wise, it might make sense to have those discussions now with the understanding that we may not be able to phase in customers right away, but once we have the membership in place, then we can begin planning to serve the load and possibly bring folks on in very early 2012.
Okay, thanks. So a number of weighty issues here, kind of how we want to expand, what the time frame ought to be, terms and conditions. So I agree, very timely discussion right now. So love to hear from the directors at this point with any questions or thoughts.
Well, Donna, that's very impressive that the interest has been that remarkable. I think it's understandable, and I suspect it will expand beyond that. At what point do you have to add staff as this proceeds?
Well, the budgets that we've laid out for membership is intended to account for the initial staff workload that we would need at the front end. And then as as customers get rolled in, we would be certainly needing to add staff to maintain the level of service that we've been providing currently. And the customer revenue would be structured to accommodate that. That would all be a part of the data analysis that we do at the very beginning to make sure that the resources will be there to cover the draw on staff resources. If we do the modeling and determine that it's not going to work out for one reason or another, then we'll know that at the beginning, and we, of course, wouldn't be able to go forward if that was the case.
My assumption is you're all busy, right? You spend the day, your days are full. So
And all into the night.
regardless of what, kind of the documentation and upfront lifting that you would have to do, there's going to be additional ongoing. So it's a given that you're going to have an ongoing increased cost.
Yeah.
It's just a question of what degree. So rather than just quote people upfront costs, you almost have to even before you start discussions with people, they have to be on board that they're going to be directly bearing those costs. Otherwise, you're loading costs onto other customers who are not part of that next tranche of people. And the flip side is you're going to have multiple contracts geared. Are you going to dump it all in one pool, or are you going to have one contract going over here, one contract servicing this pool of people, and then you're going to administer things very separately, and that drives a different type of organization than what you have now.
Yeah, that's a great point. We actually explored that quite a bit in the executive committee, and I think we all agreed that the best approach would be to pool everything. And at one point we were talking about another option that would be an option where you could join for a while and then leave. And there were a lot of problems with that, one of which would be the disaggregating of customer load tied to the resources that you procure. And we determined that the only way to really make this work effectively would be to add a member, have them always be a member, do the procurement. I mean, many of the procurement that we're doing right now for 40 megawatts of new solar is 20 to 25-year contracts. As is the renewable contracts that we signed in December. Those are very long-term contracts. Those are 18-year contracts. And so when we do the procurement, we would, of course, need to do additional procurement, but it would be for the long term, knowing that we would have that customer base into the long term.
Director Tremaine.
Yeah, Dawn and I went to last Tuesday's Richmond City Council meeting, and I was very heartened by their interest. They are very interested in working with us, exploring the various options, including the potential of becoming a member. I see a lot of logic to that because they are contiguous to us. They're our neighbor. And the fact that they're out of county isn't really problematic to me. I think that this is a major reason why we formed. We wanted to see the revolution grow. And certainly we're seeing every indication that it is growing. I have a problem signing on folks that are not contiguous to us, that feels a little weird to me. But I like the incubator approach. And I think that we can offer a number of services that will make it so much easier for other entities to form their own CCAs than it was for us. And less expensively, you know. And I think that that's one of our real callings, you know, is to make sure that more CCAs like us that are interested most in greenhouse gas and interested most in renewable energy, as opposed to, say, price or whatever, that they launch and they flourish, or that they become a member of us and we flourish. I think that if SB 976 passes, not SB, the AB 976 passes, our ability to provide that service is going to be all the more important, because it's going to be very hard for folks to work with one set of consultants and then at launch have to change consultants. I mean, first of all, the consultant pool isn't all that big right now, so the market's not there. It would create for us the opportunity to be that front-end consultant and to provide a lot of that information and a lot of that service. So it may very well be that in order for us to, you know, to forward the revolution, that we have to take that role if 976 passes. But I think that this is exciting times. This is absolutely a part of the dream, and I'm very excited.
I have a question.
Director Marshall.
Ditto to everything you said, Lou. I have just a question, Dawn. I'm going to assume that the upcoming pricing structure, the flattening of the rate structure, will help us as we think through expansion opportunities, because the load and differences in terms of a tiered structure won't be as important, right?
Right. The analysis will be more straightforward, and it will be more advantageous from a business standpoint to get bigger. So it does provide some advantages. Okay. So the timing is good on that.
Great. And I agree that I'd like to just hear more about staff impacts, but it sounds like you've anticipated that. I wouldn't underestimate it, because you guys are maxed out already. Yeah. And especially in a pilot, there's just going to be a lot of learning going on. And so, and with the incubation, that's a whole nother line of business. That's just a huge line of business. So all great opportunities, not to be underestimated for staff impacts. I would love to have the board discuss, if not tonight, this issue around geographic scope for MEA, because as we talked in the executive committee, you know, a number of us said, you know, we're not really interested in becoming a CCA monopoly. That would be, you know, contrary to, I believe, a core belief in open markets and local power. So we have to, I think, get clear about what we see as local or regional. If we're going to become a regional agency, what does regional mean? So we've mentioned perhaps you would have to be contiguous. I don't know if that's the right configuration, but if you could look at that a little more. Because Monterey, for example, is not contiguous, right? And they're very interested, but perhaps, you know, they're a pilot for the incubation opportunity. So we can talk about all these options. And then the last is, I would just love more information to key off of what Jonathan said on contract implications and how, you know, it would be great if it were Richmond. And so as a first, how their load affects our shell contract and PPA and the ongoing discussions we're going to be having soon, I think, about credit rating and bonding. And I imagine that it's all a big net help, but it would be great to understand the mechanics of that.
Chair?
Yes.
As far as Richmond is concerned, given that they've passed a resolution sort of offering the hand to us, I think that it would be important for us to answer that tonight. with a, yes, we're interested in working with you, or we want to stay in county, or, whatever this board feels is appropriate. I think that we need to answer Richmond. We need to give them some idea of whether or not we're going to be dance partners or whether or not we're not. So,
Don, if you could flesh out, going to that point, the idea of the pilot. What do you have in mind with that?
Yeah, the pilot would be what is included in it's attachment 1 to this agenda item, which says agenda item 9, but it's really agenda item 10. It's a proposed draft for MEA membership for communities outside of Marin. And there's that kind of an overview at the top, and then there's this list, 1, 2, 3, 4 are the first steps that would need to be taken to do the analysis, look at any changes to our JPA agreement that would need to be made, make sure that the economic impacts are workable and can be, will be a net benefit and not a negative impact, which we don't anticipate. And then assisting the council with getting their ordinance adopted and approved. So those are the first 4 steps, and then we would move on to steps 5 through 12, which are more of the mechanics of getting the power supply in place and getting the other outreach to customers and that sort of thing in place. If we approve the recommended option 1 on a pilot basis, we would be approving this cost structure, and we would be able to provide it to Richmond so they would know what it would cost for them to work with us. And that obviously is important, as it would have been to our own jurisdictions, knowing what it would cost to do this, if we wanted, whether we want to do this program or not. So that's what we would be approving tonight, is this cost structure and approach on a pilot basis. And we'd be allowing Richmond, or thanking Richmond for being our guinea pig, and they might turn out that they're getting a lot that we'll determine, the costs need to go up with our next partner because we underestimated it, or that may not happen, but it will allow us to flesh out any things that need to be adjusted. And I will say, going back to the way the costs have been structured, because we've done this before, the costs, I think that the cost compared to what it took for us to get going does seem very low. But I do think that it is realistic while not being, inflated for the other party.
Director Marshall.
On the cost issue, I agree that the cost of entry for membership seems very reasonable, considering it was pushing into $2.5 million for Marin. All that said, it's all great news. And one of the questions that we asked at the XCOM that may be worth considering down the line is a cost structure based on size. Because, for example, Sonoma County has a far different impact if we were to take on that load than, for example, the city of Richmond. It's just, I know there are many fixed costs, but then there are also a number of costs I would imagine that could go up or down just by population. So you might want to think about that. And then to Lou's point, I guess where I come down on this is sort of echoing, I think, what Richmond did, having sort of several conversations about this. For me, I would be willing to indicate deep interest, but I still want some questions answered about these specific things, since this really is the first night that we're all hearing this together. And so hopefully that would be adequate, enough to give them what they need, and also understanding what the off-ramps are. I mean, we have one off-ramp after the $40,000, the $40,000 initial fee, and I guess then after that, we really understand the implications of the load addition, right? So that gives us more detailed information too on the impacts to the agency. Yeah. So, and I also want to say, I think we just need to think through because this will set precedent. And so there are some policy implications that I think do need to be vetted and put on the books sooner than later.
Director Collins.
It seems to me that the policy is the first thing we should get into about is what will the policy be, who we want, how do we want it. My sense is that the idea of this agency and this room has to do with clean air and get that revolution going that Lou's talking about and keep it going. Maybe not directly, but indirectly. To the extent that this group can lead, it's wonderful. And maybe we can't have everybody be partners, but we can sure as heck be part of a larger sphere of clean energy out there. Maybe these are potential partners. When you incubate somebody, that becomes a potential partner. And maybe you've got a dozen, ultimately, who knows how many partners who can partner together to build your own facilities, to buy, and whatever that partnership might benefit for everyone in the partnership. But I'd like to drill down on cost. The problem I have with the fixed cost is, what if? There's a loss, who knows, an environmental issue, some other issue. So I think that not only Richmond, but everybody else, we should all know what the risks are and what the cost might be. To take off on Jonathan's point, I like the idea of pay-as-you-go from day one, because we provide a lot of services and that's wonderful, but it comes out of somebody's pocket, which is the MEA pocket, and that money is for things that we budgeted ourselves. So I'm thinking maybe we want to look at this cost thing in maybe a little different way. Maybe it's a minimum against an hourly or a T&M, so that everyone's treated equally. Also, we got our money back, as I remember. We borrowed money, we were able to pay it back. We got it back out of the proceeds of the customer sales. Does Richmond or anyone else get their money back? And if so, how? I thought about those things.
Well, can I address that? Because
Sure.
Don and I had that conversation on the ride home, and in fact, the real upfront costs that were spent by the county on the city's behalves, I mean, our cities didn't pay in because the county spent the money on our behalf. But that was a couple $1 million.
It's $2 million.
$2 million that nobody got paid back. You know, in the years of study and the consultants consultants' time that was paid for, and you know, all of the stuff that laid the groundwork before we even formed as a board and before our members even joined. That money wasn't paid back. That money was spent on our behalf and well spent, but that money was not paid back. So the answer to that question is no.
So that was taxpayer money, and Marin County taxpayer money.
Correct.
Went to.
And water
Well,
agency
you're sitting
money.
with some of the debt right now. It still exists, right? Some of the staff time that the county devoted for free, was not, I think, rolled into that number before the funds were, correct me if I'm wrong. So, but, I think you gotta be really careful with this, because you gotta decide, like I keep saying this every once in a while, what you wanna be. And you wanna be a consulting organization and hold people's hands and walk them through and bill by the hour, and that's a different type of employee, it's a different type of structure, it's a different goal set. Or do you wanna be an operating entity and administer these contracts for a variety of municipalities of different sizes and shapes, and it doesn't matter if they're next door or the other side of the world for that matter, if it's in the same pool. Technically they have to be in the United States, we can't really service them in the same energy grid, but it doesn't matter if they're in Monterey or across the Richmond Bridge. So is that what you want to be? Do you want to create a larger and larger organization because you get the economies of scale of it, and then what do you become? And then I think sometimes we assume everyone's the same wherever you go, and some of the decisions we make here are policy decisions. They have nothing to do with economics. And where did 25% as a goal come from? It's a policy decision. That may be good for one entity, but not so good for another, in terms of the base product. Do you just say take it or leave it, or do you get into this, do you go down these paths? That's the two products we offer, or do you, where do you go from there? So, it's not a small step to do what you're thinking about doing. I don't think it's outside the realm of possibility, but I really think it deserves the same amount of attention as you put into the original business plan for this entity, which was just for the Marin County and/or some subset of its municipalities to join. I don't really have a preference of Marin or non-Marin. It doesn't matter to me, as long as the costs are allocated accordingly, and frankly, the risks are shared accordingly. Quoting a fixed price when you don't know how much outreach, how many meetings you're going to have to go to, you know, that in a consulting contract, you say, I'm only going to show up 3 times.
Right.
If you pay me every time I show up after that to another board meeting or council meeting or whatever, you got to pay me again and again and again and again. And you know how many meetings did you go through with this, and just it's what needs to be done, but you can't foresee how many of those are going to exist. So if you're going to cover your costs, you really have to be careful in that, and you can't foresee what that is, less giving yourself these sort of outs. So I'm not saying that proselytizing, you know, this concept is not a good thing. It certainly is a good thing, or we shouldn't have done it in the first place. But let's just make sure we do it in a way that we don't end up cleaning up little messes over and over and over again, because somebody has to bear those costs, whether it's just you and your own aggravation level or the cost to actually enter into these things. So, you know, I'm glad that Richmond and the other communities that you mentioned are certainly interested in, and we should certainly pursue it, because if it lowers our overhead kind of concept for this entity, that's great. But let's just make sure we've, you know, sort of dotted the I's and crossed the T's before we dance with anybody, because everybody will be unhappy if it turns out.
If you step on your toe.
Yeah. If it turns out to be much more difficult. And, you know, I think it's great to leverage, you know, the work that you're already doing, like, you know, because you can advocate for CCAs for, you know, 100,000 people or 500,000 people. It doesn't really make much of a difference. You get more respect probably if you got 500,000 people. So that's, you know, there are things like that where you can certainly leverage the existence of this organization. But I think the day-to-day and the unknown, we just have to make sure we have better. I mean, we've had this on the agenda, but this is the first discussion we've had at the board level about it. So I just want to make sure that, I know you've thought about it a lot, but that, you know, I don't see the thoughts translated into this is how that would work. I'm not saying you haven't, you probably have this all somewhere, but it's how, okay, if you went to pilot X and went through that process, you know, how would it work, and how do you make sure you're sort of stay out of a big pitfall?
Yes.
I had just a couple of comments. I think the pilot idea is excellent, because it does allow us to be able to track the costs, see, you know, what it really takes, what else we need to include, or adjust the costs, and also consider how the costing may be done to be effective. I think it's important to also have the other Marin cities that may want to come in be able to come in addition to some external, like Richmond, who is very close. I think there does need to be some policy discussion as far as what we do want to do going forward, how we might phase these in, because I know staff is very, very busy, although you've become quite a well-greased machine in a very short period of time. It's absolutely amazing, you know. And I sense maybe with this, as you're thinking about it, that you feel you can take on, you know, more customers or another entity, because you've got a lot of the things are now routinized to a certain extent. And, you know, but I also, because I know you are all very, very busy, I think to be sure that we look at staff and how we would be able to do this.
We had that discussion at the XCOM, and it was the feeling of the XCOM that the policy of the board should be that we bring Marin in, anybody from Marin that wants to come in, that we get all of interested Marin into the agency. And then maybe in the last phase, you know, concomitant with the last phase, then think about bringing in entities from the outside. And so it would be sometime next year that we would, you know, that we would bring somebody in terms of load. That's not to say that we wouldn't, if we were going to add a partner, that we wouldn't have the partner join the authority sooner than that, and then we would begin the work of planning for that load. But certainly, we would want to bring in all of interested Marin and finish that shot, you know, because that was goal one. Goal one was to get as much of Marin as possible. And once goal one is satisfied to the best of its ability, then bringing in others.
So what I'm hearing so far, and definitely want to hear from the public, is there's a strong interest in moving forward with discussions with Richmond, fleshing out a pilot program, including nailing down some important policy decisions that I think we have to make, and many of those were raised tonight by the directors. There's a immediate interest in getting as much of Marin to participate as we can, and that is desirous of doing so. I guess the one issue on that we would still need to talk about is the terms and conditions for the intra-county participation. So we can flag that issue, or if anyone has any thoughts immediately on it, why don't we flag that one for now? Any public discussion on what we're calling option one? Gene.
I think I have it right. I don't have any objection to option two, but with option one, which would incorporate them into our system.
Correct.
I'm glad the Richmond people heard me in my introductory comments, because there's a difference of opinion here as to the profitability of this organization. Clearly, they have been profitable during the first phases of their operation by only bringing in the higher rate paying customers. And they've had a profit which they will have a difficult time continuing when they bring in all of the lower rate residential customers. I hope you pick up the paper out here so that you can understand the details of the economics. Admittedly, there's still discussion. Admittedly, there's still possible improvement. I'm not recognizing that out, but there is risk associated. So my advice to you, for number one, do not promise to your potential constituents that you will compete with PG&E for 25% power on an equal basis. That's a mistake. Rather, go for the green. Don't make that promise. That's where you're going to get in trouble. Next point. We set this up to be a local thing. We paid for it with the county. And as I've just said, we've been profitable by pulling in the high guys first. We aren't going to pull in the other guys until something else happens, or maybe if we get you guys to join, we'll use your high guys so our low guys can come in. And your low guys won't be able to come in for a while. Who knows? So there's a risk associated with that. And lastly, I would really object if we did this prior to the fact that all of our residents have been invited in. All of them. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ask a question.
Sure.
Dawn, can you just say when is the decision on the flattening of the rate structure? Because that would address, I believe, many of Jean's issues.
July 1, 2012, next summer.
Not until 2012, okay.
Right.
And just to respond, the executive committee completely agrees with your assertion that no new member would come on board, or at least their load would not come on board until everyone in all of our phase 2 customers were on board first.
Yeah, and just to clarify, to make sure that it's really clear for everybody, the impact of the tier shifting to the gen, off of the gen side of the bill, on July 1st of next year is going to mean that all customers, that there would effectively be a flat generation rate charged by PG&E and thus likely charged by MEA as well. So the different tiers that folks are in right now are going to become irrelevant. It's simply going to be, a count of customers, and they're all going to be the same.
Good evening.
My name is Tom Butt. I'm Vice Mayor of the City of Richmond. And I just want to iterate much of what you've heard already. We have been quite interested in this actually for a long, long time. We followed it primarily through assistance from the Local Government Commission for several years. And it was about a year ago, February or March, that Charles McGlashan came to the Local Government Commission meeting in Yosemite and made a presentation on it, and I had a long conversation with him about it. And he promised to come to Richmond and make a presentation to our city council, and I harangued him month after month after month. But I guess he was too busy setting this organization up. And I finally got him over to talk to a committee of the city council, I think in March, and it was actually just a few days before his death. And so some of the city council heard it then for the first time, or at least heard all the details. And then it was just last week that Dawn and Lou came over, and the rest of our city council actually heard all the details of this for the first time. And our council did vote overwhelmingly, but not totally, to support this and try to move it forward, and we did adopt that resolution. And so we're very interested in becoming your new partner. For those of you who don't know it, Richmond and Marin County, actually also Contra Costa County, are contiguous on land. The boundary runs right through Red Rock Island. You can step from the city of Richmond to Marin County in one step. So, we're almost more contiguous than, maybe some of those places out in West Marin. So I don't know what else to say. I sense there's a little waffling among the board about when to do this and how soon to do it and what to charge and that kind of thing. And I guess if there's anything we can do to help get those decisions made so we can move it ahead, let us know. But other than that, I guess we're just kind of hiding and watching to see what you guys are going to do. But we really do want to do this. Richmond has about 35,000 households, and I don't know how many businesses we have who would be customers, but probably, at least 5,000 maybe, something like that. Do you guys know?
I couldn't say right now.
Well, anyway, so we're talking about 40, 45,000 customers, and there are some customers there that are very heavy users of power, industrial customers. So we're ready, willing, and able, and anything we need to do to help you make your decisions and move this forward, we'll be happy to do it.
Thanks. Anyone else from the public? Barbara.
Well, I just want to say that I'm so pleased that the Richmond folks stepped up. I was on the East Bay, when I started working on CCA over 10 years ago, and I know Richmond was part of another grouping on the East Bay, and they haven't gone forward yet, but I really love the idea about teaming up Marin and Richmond. I think it's a great idea. And I also do think that it's going to be a very large burden on the staff to do these expansions, but I like getting started with this program with Richmond. I don't know if I'm a little confused about what's a pilot and what's, but it seems like, okay, this will be the first one, and we might need to make some adjustments as we go along, but this would be a great place to start, and I hope you will be able to make a decision to go forward as soon as possible.
Thank you, Barbara. Stan.
Hi, I'm wondering if we change the name of Marin Clean Energy, maybe it'd be Rich Marin Energy?
Drum roll.
Really?
Okay, on that note,
Chair, I'd like to offer a motion.
Sure.
I would move that the board directs staff to continue pursuing the development of options 1 and options 2. That direction includes continuing to converse with the city of Richmond and coming to an agreement on step 1 through 4 costs with Richmond, so that we can get to a point where we would formalize that relationship, at least for the exploration. And that the board direct the XCOM and the technical committee to work with staff to develop these proposals and report back monthly.
Further discussion? Do we have yes, Director Marshall.
I think I'm doing this correctly. If I could amend that, and on the second half of that, direct that staff come back to this board within a month or maybe 2 maximum with some more detailed, fleshed out responses to some of the questions and concerns that have been raised this evening. So that what I'm hearing you say, Lou, is that we would authorize moving ahead with the first tranche, if you will, since we like to use that word, the first tranche, but not in anticipation of the full rollout, but that I know, even though I've been in the executive committee meetings, I think that the comments and questions here this evening, it just behooves us to bring it back and put some additional structure around this. There's no big rush. It could be done this next month or early fall. Does that sound reasonable to folks?
I think that's what you had.
How is that?
That's what I had.
Yeah,
I think that's what the motion was.
Yeah.
Please come back to the board for
exactly.
finalization once it's fleshed out and developed further.
Yeah. So it's an ongoing item to be
Okay.
further discussed with those broad concepts and parameters.
Could you add to that an analysis of the phasing of the customers that we're going to have in terms of timing, not only Richmond coming in, but how that will be affected by what we're doing going forward, and also maybe into the mix if these other inside Marin agencies come in, how that fits in the mix in terms of timing, numbers, and so that it's not just one at a time, it's sort of a look at everything at once.
Mm-hmm.
And perhaps some direct outreach then to the remaining Marin towns, just to kind of give them a heads up, hey, we'd like for you to come on in.
Well, again, I'm almost viewing that as a somewhat separate.
Separate?
So
Okay.
Director Tremaine's motion goes toward options 1 and 2. Do we want to
Well,
treat?
wait, we're not taking on option 2 tonight, are we?
Well, I think the
That's
way
the incubation.
the way he's teed it up, we certainly can, in the sense that it would be an ongoing fleshing out.
Yeah, we
of
would
the
continue
option.
to develop the idea.
Oh, good.
We're not tabling that option.
Right.
Good.
Right?
Right.
Okay, so.
And because there is a part of option 1 that talks about entities within Marin, that is a natural thing that we would be working on as well. So this is, sort of a broad motion giving, responsibilities to the 2 subcommittees and staff to hang meat on these bones and bring it back as something that this body can evaluate.
But I think, you know, what Dick's point is that you kind of want to see what the landscape is and almost have check in with the entities that you've talked to, and Richmond certainly being at the head of the class, you know, in terms of interest and whether it's Novato or whatever, because your resource planning is going to be driven by that. So, you know, whether Richmond is 6 months or a year out, in terms of just, you know, churning, getting the process kind of going, and, you know, the polling and all the others, you know, you treat it almost like, you know, I can't see PG&E stepping away lightly from all of these entities. So it's going to be, because it's their customer base. So, you know, and they'll be smarter from the mistakes that they made the last time, I would imagine. I mean, look, it's PG&E, so let's not assume that necessarily. But, okay, that was not necessary. But so, I mean, almost like a Gantt chart of workload and people driven off that workload, and, you know, that it'll change, but at least it's a stake in the ground. You can kind of say, okay, well, you know, this would be the growth of your organization, and how would you fund it?
Yeah, absolutely. That analysis has to be part of this, as part of question.
So, you know, in terms of the, just to clarify on Lou's motion, so it's the conceptualizing that you're putting forward here. It's not the
Of 1 and 2,
That's
which
correct.
would include an analysis
Right.
of
This is,
timing
it's a motion to
relative
further
to-
develop these ideas,
Right.
and that the board agrees that this is something we should pursue.
Right, rather than endorse the
Right, correct.
$130,000.
Absolutely.
Agreed, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I have one last thing I'd love you to check, because you referenced lawsuits and PG&E, and we don't actually know how they might respond. So I assume that Greg and everyone's done the due diligence on, of course, the legality of our expansion, and just thinking through the potential hit from PG&E. I mean, is there an opportunity for them to file suit in any way? How does 976 play into this? All that kind of stuff. I think if you could come back with some more analysis on that, that'd be great.
Yeah, let's be clear, we are kicking the bully in the butt.
Yeah,
again.
totally agree, but, you
There's
know,
no limitation.
who pays for those legal expenses if we are?
Right. There's no limitation either under state law or under our agreement in terms of adding membership or where those members are. So that really does become a policy decision for this board to decide how you would define that.
Cool, okay.
So I'll second Lou's.
Do you want to?
I think maybe Lou should restate the motion.
Yeah, why don't you restate it?
I'm sorry, Lou, for you do that. There was a long discussion.
That's the same thing.
Okay. The motion is that the board direct staff, the technical committee, and the executive committee to continue developing the concepts outlined in proposals 1 and 2, options 1 and 2, incorporating all of the questions and statements that have been made by the directors in this discussion.
Smart. Very smart. He's been doing this for a while.
I'll second that.
Okay, any further discussion on the motion?
Yeah, I mean, I would only say to the folks from Richmond, I think it's best that you're set up for success, and we're trying to, you know, have a small organization and try to figure out working with you as kind of to how to get to that point, rather than have a book of answers to be able to just hand you to run out of here with. So that's my point.
Okay, all in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Opposed? That matter carries. Now, that leaves the in-Marin load discussion. And we have a proposal. A big issue is still the terms and conditions. And we can certainly discuss those tonight, get a sense, or we can also bring that back over time, depending on the pleasure of the board. Does anyone have any immediate thoughts?
Yeah, I think that it would be appropriate for us to, on a town-by-town basis, take a look at what the cost is gonna be administratively to bring them in at this point. You know, they had their opportunity when it was a free ride funded by the county. Such is no longer the case, and so it would be appropriate for there to be a cost covering for entry at this point. And I think that, you know, and so that's my feeling on the matter. I really think that the opportunity to come in without having to pay some sort of an entry cost has come and gone. It's unfortunate that they didn't seize the opportunity when it was out there for them to seize, but that any of Marin's towns are certainly welcome, and that we will be very, very careful to charge no more than it will cost us to bring them in. We'll make it as affordable for them as it is affordable for us, but that we can't just bear that cost.
Any reaction to that?
Agreed.
I would say that was the original concept, and again, it's a risk, who bears the cost and for the risks, and you know, I think whether it's Richmond or Larkspur, it doesn't, you know, if it takes more effort, you're gonna pay more, and if it's because it's otherwise the ratepayer in San Rafael is subsidizing the ratepayer in Larkspur, and that's not fair.
Donna, the discussions we've had with Corte Madera and Novato and Larkspur, if any, gotten to the point where they have requested information on buy-in and that sort of thing, and cost of buy-in?
No, we have not had recent discussions with Corte Madera or Novato. We have had, I've had a discussion with a couple of folks in Ross. They might be interested in looking at this. And I understand there have been discussions with one or two members in Larkspur, but we haven't gotten to the point where there's been any type of formal request. We could certainly, you know, reach out to those communities.
But your impression is that they would not expect to come in without some sort of buy-in?
I don't know what their expectations are. We certainly have never stated or given the impression that there would not be a cost to join, nor have we really talked about what the cost would be. Before we launched to customers, there was some discussion with Novato in the winter of '09 regarding trying to integrate them into the PPA we were about to approve with Shell Energy at that time. It was kind of a last-ditch effort there on their council to figure out if they could join all of a sudden in that contract. And we did discuss what the cost would be at that time to make adjustments and do legal analysis and that sort of thing. So they were aware there would be costs at that time, but we have not spoken about it since then. So we haven't looked at what the cost would be today.
I think that we really have to figure out, I mean, so much of it is a marketing question. And we really need to figure out what this outreach is going to look like and what we're going to say to them. And inclusive of the fact that there is, you know, a pay-to-play aspect of it. But I think that that's another thing that the XCOM, along with Jamie, really needs to sit down and noodle and come back to the board, you know, with a concept, you know, of exactly how, what does that outreach look like? You know, what does that invitation look like? Because it is going to take some careful consideration.
And Don, you note in your report, further analysis is needed to determine the cost for the Marin-based city or town to join.
Yeah, that's correct.
Do we not need a business model, an entry business model that was in type so that one size fits all in terms of certainly the county and what information would be required so that you're not we're not reinventing the wheel each time we talk to each of these? Or I mean, is there a presentation not an application form, but something where each of these entities, they do their own homework and they provide us with the same information, enough information to then analyze it and then decide what it might cost us to
Yeah, I mean,
start
that's,
to integrate them, maybe gone that far.
I think that's what we have tonight is the beginning stage of that. We have laid out what the steps are. The goal is to get to something that's a one-size-fits-all. You know, we do have a PowerPoint that's kind of an overview of the program that we use with all of these communities, pretty much across the board without any modifications. So yeah, they're all sort of treated the same way. And you know, and as far as the mechanics of enrolling a new community, aside from the communications piece, which has its own time commitments. The load serving piece is as simple as rolling in a new phase. You know, developing a PPA to serve the load, and you could couple that with multiple communities, or it might work to our benefit to actually continue with kind of phasing in. So we're not asking everyone, okay, who wants to jump in now? It might be better to let those that are interested jump in now and deal with that, and then as others become interested later, we can phase in more. But it's simply doing the procurement is a very straightforward process to serve the new load.
It'd be interesting to know, when you start crossing over, because when you have a small pool, when you put a little bit of water in it, it changes the dynamics of a small pool. You have a huge pool, it doesn't make so much difference. So as you fold in more procurement contracts, it'll change your blended rate significantly on a small pool. Folding in, 45,000 or 25,000 households or whatever the number is going to change the dynamics of I forget what our pool size is now of households, but it's a meaningful jump. So if that rate comes out higher or lower, that's going to certainly, so how you account for that in the beginning is meaningful. That's what I was saying earlier, that do you service different upfront because you're going to, do you increase the rates for everyone by adding a new community? And that's something that's both a policy as well as a financial decision. Do you subsidize that so the rates don't change over here, and do you have enough to subsidize that so that?
Well, I think that's something I can respond to right now, because I think it's kind of an obvious answer as far as our analysis thus far. The very first step in both options that you'll see is getting load data from PG&E, requesting that load data. And Richmond actually just went through the process of requesting that load data. That was the first step in Marin. Once we have the load data, we know how much usage we're going to see in a year, what the patterns of usage are. So, we can determine when it's going to be more expensive or less expensive to serve the customers. And that's the very first step, is to do an analysis of whether we can integrate this load without having any rate impact. So I think that if we did the analysis and it looked like there wouldn't be a way to integrate this community while not having any impact on our existing rates, there would certainly, I think the response to everyone would be, oh, it's not going to work. This expansion isn't going to work. Maybe we can try it again in a few years. But that's kind of a threshold question that we look at up front. I don't think that our board, I don't think our staff or our technical team would make a recommendation to go forward unless the addition of a new community was financially beneficial, particularly in the short term and in the long term.
Maybe I'm not, maybe I'm speaking in a different language than because your knowledge base is deeper in this. But if we have a blended rate of 5 cents, 7 cents, and the time you fold in that new community, you have to go out and procure at that moment in time, because you haven't banked that. Presumably, we haven't banked an additional capacity other than our own forecasted capacity additions. So, but that rate you go out at that moment in time is 10 cents for whatever reason, natural gas spikes or whatever it is. How do you, then your blend, if you're on a small pool, that blended rate will change significantly. If it's a huge pool of people, it's going to just get lost in the rounding errors, right? So that's more Is that where you thought I was going, or is that different than where?
Well, that's actually the step earlier, that,
Right.
that is, we have to ensure that there's flexibility on when we phase in a customer.
Right.
So that's kind of a starting point, that we let everyone know up front, hey, we can't promise we're gonna be serving your customers next month or next year at a certain time. We have to wait until the market matches up in the right place. Otherwise, we don't begin serving them.
Yeah, because once you have the load data, that's one of the first questions you go out and ask. What's it gonna, you know, what is it gonna cost to serve this load?
Right.
So that's, you know, that's just a natural part of that, of the use of that load data.
Well, and I think that's step 2 that you have here. The first one is obtain and analyze customer data, and the second step is analyze economic impact of MEA for serving customers.
And well, and then the other thing I would like to add that is, you know, let's make sure that we're all mindful that we're taking the next step, I think pretty soon, hopefully, in terms of diversifying our procurement strategies. And that is going into either co-investment or, you know, design, build, own. And so how does additional load impact bonding capacity? Does the credit rating, how do those two things play together? What's the plan? I mean, I think actually I'm hopeful that this topic is going to be teed up for a board workshop maybe later this fall, because it goes to a little bit of, Jonathan, what you were saying, which is kind of what do you want to be when you grow up, and what's, you know, what's the strategic vision that includes additional load, that includes expansion. But what I would love to know is sort of how it all fits together. And it's really important, I think, to all of us, speak up if you disagree, but that we're being equally mindful about expanding into local power generation and development, along with just buying power for new communities. Mm-hmm. So I want to see those equally prioritized. Yep.
Makes sense.
Yep.
Don, what's your pleasure on this item? I don't think it's not ready for any action per se at this point.
No, we were just looking for some board feedback, which I think we got tonight. And if folks are interested, you know, folks who aren't on the XCOM or technical committee would like to provide feedback to me directly, that would be terrific. Or if you'd like to come and sit in and be part of the committee of the whole structure that we do sometimes at those committee meetings, please feel free to do so, because I think the more of the board input at this stage, I think the better our outcome will be. So I really appreciate all your input tonight. Hope we can get started.
Any further public input on this? Let's start with Rachel. Yes.
Thank you. Just listening to the interest from Richmond, I wonder how much that has been publicized, because it's quite an endorsement for what you've done here, and I can't think of anything that would spark interest within Marin more than hearing that somebody outside of us is going to sign on when, you know, we're not in. So when you're talking about that, I just feel like you're going to get, you know, jealous children, and when you're figuring out, you know, fleshing out your option 1 and option 2, and this becomes publicized, I think you should probably be prepared to tell, you know, towns within our county what their possible options are to come in, because they're going to say, well, me first, you know, this is my town. So anyway, I just wanted to, I think it's going to send a very popular market signal. So thanks.
As soon as it hits television.
You should be careful.
There's no hiding it now.
Hi, it's Stan Sparrow again. When I think of Richmond, I think of SunPower Solar. They're based out of there. And since they're getting a $2.3 billion buyout by Total Oil Company, possibly soon, well, maybe we could do some sort of deal, since that SB 9 something hasn't been completed yet, where we can just an idea of communicate with SunPower that they got lots of land. We could put up 40 megawatts to 600 megawatts of solar, and maybe have make some sort of sponsorship, so SunPower and all that funds they have, which is for their financing and getting solar panels going, and somehow make some sort of corporate deal with SunPower for Richmond to get in there so that they could sponsor them, help you guys out with the expenses, and make some sort of deal, because it's just an idea, and but Richmond is famous for SunPower. It's probably the biggest corporation there, and is heading to be one of the largest corporations in the West. You see their stocks went from $16 to $22 a share when they were offered that buyout, and they're going bigger and bigger and bigger. Thanks.
I'm glad you said that, Stan, because one of the things that I neglected to mention that was part of the discussion with the Richmond Council, and it was a particular concern of Councilman Bouzet, that such a partnership between Marin County and their city would have the effect of job generation in the city of Richmond, as we are equally interested in that for Marin County. So that, you know, that is of keen interest, that component of it is of keen interest to Richmond, and I think that if we move forward together, creating the opportunities for job generation on both sides of the bay would be a chief concern. And certainly we would be hearing that from Richmond's representative if it gets to that point.
Barbara?
I'm sorry, if I could just tag on to that, just a reminder that we are actually currently in negotiations with SunPower. We're going to be going out to Richmond next week to meet with them at their facility for the 40 megawatts of solar that we had an RFP out for. They were one of the shortlisted candidates, and we are really hoping that we get to work with them as well, and it'd be another great linkage between us and Richmond. So I just wanted to remind everyone.
Thanks for mentioning that. Okay, Barbara.
I happen to know about a cogeneration facility over there. I don't know whether that's going to be part of the mix or not, but that is one of the things that was going to be helpful, because we were going to be required to get cogeneration, which doesn't exist in Marin, and so that's one way we might be able to access cogeneration. And I also wanted to mention that the more we can show that there are more cities, I'm not sure exactly what would be required, you know, what stage they would have to be in order to be counted in the long-term procurement proceeding as going to CCA, but the proposed decision in the long-term procurement proceeding is in September, so it would be nice if we had a, you know, some sort of a decision to go, you know, to firm up the partnership with Richmond and other local, you know, venues as well by September. So that might be something to shoot for.
Anyone else? Well, very good discussion, everyone. Thank you. So let's move to item 11, board member and staff. Okay. We are adjourned.
Tight ship there, dude. Much shorter.